Nine.
9-6. Do it.
9:16. Welcome back to the morning show with Jeff and Will here on AM 1700 WRCR Haverstraw and WRCR.com. And joining us now, as she does every Monday at this time, Tina Traster, the founder and the brains behind rcbizjournal.com. It's the Rockland County Business Journal.com. You can find it at rcbizjournal.com. Tina Traster. Good morning, Tina. How you doing?
Good morning, Rockland land. How is everybody? Very cold, very, very brutally cold.
It's a little chilly out there, yes. Don't be fooled by all that sunshine.
No, single digits we're talking here.
Yep.
So I am going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is adaptive reuse. Now, for anybody who doesn't know what that is, let's just have a little definition here. So adaptive reuse generally looks at an old historic building that has been decommissioned or out of use or underutilized or more likely sitting fallow with weeds growing up around it. The two, of course, that jump to mind here in Rockland County, the two most prominent examples of that, is actually one is Letchworth Village on the Haverstraw side, and then on the other side of Willow Grove Road on the Stony Point side. All told, I think we're talking about 50 buildings that are essentially have been rotting for about 2 decades. And this is sad. And I came across an incredible example of adaptive reuse when I was in Orange County, up in around Warwick, not very far from here. So back in 2011, the town of Warwick had learned from the then governor that their prison, that their correctional facility was going to be shutting down. At the time, they had 7 prisons that they were shutting down for cost-saving reasons, and this was going to leave a 730-acre site potentially blighted, unused, fallow, and not to mention also in this case the loss of about 300 jobs. The prison had been there since the 1970s, but prior to that, it had been like a reform school for boys that Eleanor Roosevelt had actually been involved in building. And so the campus is filled with these beautiful brick but haunting buildings. And in this case, the town leaders at the time, they acted quickly, and they basically seized the opportunity to create something called the Warwick Office and Technology Park. Now, you may be thinking, yawn, that's kind of boring, it's just an office park. But no, this is not an ordinary office park. This has been taking this incredible campus, reclaiming most of it, 600 acres, for recreation, including a lake that had always been inaccessible to people in the town or the area, and then taking the buildings that remain, so some of the buildings that remain, repurposing them, as well as using empty plots, empty pieces of land to essentially turn into a hub for the cannabis industry, for production of cannabis. So it's an incredible place. The go-to, if you're just sort of a regular person, or a visitor, would be the brewery. That's kind of one focal point. That's in an old brick building. And the brewery itself is fantastic. It's interesting because it's a brewery, and then they've got a pizza oven, and they've got a little bit of swag at the front that they're selling, and then they're actually making, the brew on site, and they've got a patio outdoors. So they've made it, a destination, think tourism. They've made it a place that's family friendly. So when I popped in, there were like little kids everywhere. They were eating the pizza. The adults were drinking the beer, and it was this like integrated concept. It was packed. The place was absolutely packed. So this is an example of taking. So this is in the midst of this business park. You've got this brewery. Then there's also a whiskey bar. there's also there's a main there's a main building in the front, a beautiful old like manor house, and what their IDA came up with along with this whole plan was to take that building, and originally they used it as what's called an incubator. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, beyond the scientific term, it's when you give small businesses like a leg up with small spaces or certain incentives, and you let them work on whatever concept they have as a startup. So one of the occupants of that was a fragrance company. They do candles. And eventually it came to be where they've taken over the entire, I think it's 10,000 square feet, it's in my story, but they've taken over the entire building, and they even have a little retail section, which it's such a beautiful place for candles and fragrance candles. So there you have another kind of full, like consumer-facing retail element, but to a building that's been essentially put back into use as a manufacturing facility for a startup that was, operating out of a basement just a few years ago. The cannabis part of this campus is huge, and there are certain areas when you drive around, if your windows are open, I think you can actually get high because the smell of the cannabis manufacturing is really potent. But
fantastic.
All joking aside, they've been able to attract. Actually, the leaders of this were able to. They had in mind to try to attract cannabis because out in Orange County, there were a lot of growers and people that were starting to get into the industry, and they envisioned. It didn't happen exactly organically. They sort of envisioned that this could be a hub for cannabis. So there was a concerted effort to reach out to these companies, including, there's a very large national company called Green Thumb Industries, and they built a 400,000 square foot facility there. So the way that they made this happen, and this is kind of in this story, I sort of, flag Stony Point and Haverstraw, and I say, listen, this is how they did this. The way they did this was that they teamed up with, they created something called a Warwick Valley Local Development Corporation, which acquired the land in the first place for just $3.7 million. Like I said, they allocated another 600 acres or so for recreation, so they created a park. And then they worked with the New York Office of Empire Development and other granting entities to create to get the land what they call shovel ready. So there were all these parcels that were divided and given the infrastructure that they needed. Each of them covering 50 acres with water, sewer, natural gas, fiber optics, roads, and pad sites. So what they did was they really said, they made this place inviting, for commerce, and as opposed to kind of just waiting. In other words, they were proactive, and so it paid off. And now every site is spoken for. The whole park is basically either built out or in the process of being built out. It's actually it doesn't look like a business park. I'll tell you that. It's very interesting. It's very green. It's very beautiful. It's not like symmetric. It kind of wanders there and wanders there. And there's also a big sports facility there, a training facility. So that's another thing that's there. And in the end of the day, what they've been able to do is turn this what would have been a very big empty piece of land into something that has. They say that right now there are about 300 jobs that it's created, and let me see, taxes. I know that they collected, I'm just scrolling through here, I can't remember off the top of my head, a significant amount of taxes in, there we are, over $400,000 in property taxes in 2024. So I think we all, if anyone's ever been on the Letchworth or certainly the Haverstraw side is even worse in terms of, I think there are 40 abandoned buildings. And while there is a housing development slated that got through on, it's called, BNE, on the Haverstraw side, that's going to be about 300 units, that's all that it is. It's not anything, it's not a bigger vision. It's not even a planned development where there's more to it. It's just housing. And, the way these campuses thrive best is when they're reimagined into something else, something useful, something revenue generating, tax generating. I mean, we all know in Rockland how punching the taxes are here. And we also see, the various agencies coming after our tax dollars. But there are ways that can be mitigated, with good ideas and good development projects. And this is just a great example of that. So I had one more thing I was going to touch on, unless we have any questions so far. Anyone?
No, but real quick, we only have just a minute left. So, before we get into a different topic, instead of getting into a different topic, I was just wondering, has the residents of the Warwick area, how do they feel about this new facility?
That's a really good question, because that was one of the questions that I had. That was one of the questions I asked the gentleman who I spoke to for this. One of the people I spoke to for this story. So what they strategically did was they got buy-in before they put this whole thing together. They spoke to the people in the town. They held public sessions. They made sure that people were behind this idea. And in Warwick, they were behind this idea. I think that they were accepting and excited about the cannabis industry. I think that nobody wanted, I guess they were able to communicate to them that there was no, upside of having just this kind of hulking open development that would just kind of sit. And so the key was buy-in. That's what he said. He said that they made sure that the public was behind this idea, and apparently they were. And this is an example of development where, it wasn't like a fight. And that's what kind of makes it interesting, is that it wasn't a fight.
And like you said, it'll be interesting to see if the remaining portions of Letchworth that still need to be developed, even the H&A property down in Orangetown, if they take any cues from what's going on up in Warwick. Tina Traster, thank you so much for joining us as always. To always check out rcbizjournal.com, sign up for email newsletters, and all sorts of things you can find out there. It's a very fascinating site. Thanks, Tina. Have yourself a great week, and Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and we'll talk to you again on Monday.
Happy holidays.